Becoming by Michelle Obama. Picture this. You're 7 years old, sitting at a piano recital, your palms sweating, your heart pounding. This is your moment. You've practiced 1,000 times. You know every note, every chord by heart. There's just one tiny problem. The piano you learned on, the one in your great-aunt's cramped music room, is old and battered. Its keys are yellowed like old teeth. And middle C, the most important key in the entire universe, has a little chip missing from the corner. That chip? That's your North Star. Your anchor, your "you are here" sign. You find that chip, and boom, you know exactly where to start. But now? You're sitting in this fancy downtown hall in front of a pristine, gleaming baby grand piano that probably costs more than your house. The audience is watching. Your parents are smiling proudly in the crowd. The spotlight is on you. You lift your fingers to the keys, and your stomach drops into your shoes. There's no chip. Every key is perfect, identical, a seamless, maddening ribbon of black and white stretching out before you like a piano-shaped nightmare. And in that terrifying moment of perfection, you are completely, utterly, catastrophically lost. You have absolutely no idea where to begin. This is a real story from the childhood of Michelle Obama, and honestly, it's basically the story of her entire life, learning to perform in a world that wasn't built for you, a world full of perfect pianos when you've only ever known the chipped ones. It's about finding your way when all your familiar landmarks vanish. Today, we're diving into Becoming, her memoir that sold over 17 million copies worldwide and made everyone from Oprah to your next-door neighbor cry happy tears. But this isn't just a collection of "That Time I Met Famous People" stories from a former First Lady. This is a profound, deeply personal masterclass in navigating the questions that haunt us all. Who am I? And who am I meant to become? Michelle Obama takes us from a cramped apartment on Chicago's South Side to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the most famous address on the planet, and she does it with the kind of raw honesty that feels like your wisest friend spilling all her secrets over coffee at 2 a.m. By the end of this journey, you'll understand the powerful forces that shaped one of the most admired women of our time. But more importantly, you'll discover a timeless secret about your own story, that it's not a destination you arrive at and check off your list. It's a process you're always in. Your becoming is never, ever finished. Let's begin. Book Summary. Part 1. The South Side Girl, or How to Thrive in a Too Small Space. Our story doesn't begin in a palace. It begins on the second floor of a small brick house on Chicago's South Side, where the soundtrack to childhood was the plink, plink, plink of other people's piano mistakes. This was Michelle Robinson's world. Downstairs lived her great-aunt Robbie, a formidable piano teacher who demanded perfection and rarely seemed satisfied with anything less. Her domain was a silent, formal space where the furniture was covered in plastic, of course, and porcelain figurines were absolutely, positively never to be touched. One wrong move, and you'd probably trigger some kind of ancient curse. But upstairs? Upstairs was life. It was chaos and love and noise, where Michelle and her older brother Craig slid across polished floors in their socks, like Tom Cruise in Risky Business, and held full-on boxing matches in the kitchen. The space was so tiny that for years, a flimsy wooden partition was the only thing separating her bed from her brother's. Privacy? Never heard of her. This whole vibrant, cramped world was held together by two absolute pillars, Fraser and Marion Robinson. Her father, Fraser, was a city worker who spent his days tending boilers at the water filtration plant. He was quiet strength personified, unshakable discipline wrapped in a gentle soul. In his 30s, he got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that slowly, relentlessly began stealing his ability to walk. He went from a slight limp to a cane to 2 crutches, watching his own body betray him in slow motion. Michelle never heard him complain, not once. He just accepted what came and kept moving forward, because that's what you do. His pride and joy? a bronze two-door Buick he lovingly called the Deuce and a Quarter. Behind that wheel, the limitations of his failing body seemed to melt away, giving him a precious sense of freedom he couldn't find on his own 2 feet. Her mother, Marion, was the family's steady, all-seeing heart. She was the one who taught Michelle to think for herself and use her voice, loudly if necessary. When Michelle was trapped in a chaotic, failing second-grade class, her mother didn't just pat her on the head and say, "Do your best, sweetie." Nope. Marion saw the difference between whining and genuine distress. She marched into that school and, through quiet but persistent lobbying, got Michelle and a few other students moved into a better, more challenging third-grade class. Read that again. She skipped Michelle a grade because second grade wasn't good enough. Boss move. Marion's philosophy was simple but revolutionary. I'm not raising babies, I'm raising adults. She and Fraser gave their kids guidelines, not prison rules, trusting them to figure things out for themselves. This foundation of love and sky-high expectations created an ambitious little girl, even if she didn't know what she was ambitious for yet. She learned early that achievement was currency, the thing that made adults smile and doors open. In kindergarten, she froze during a reading test, completely stumped by the word white, ironic, given her future, but we'll get there. The embarrassment gnawed at her all night long. The next morning, she didn't politely ask for a do-over, she demanded it, refusing to be dismissed as incapable. She read every single color card perfectly and strutted home that day with a gold foil star stuck proudly to her shirt like a tiny boss. That same drive led her to her great-aunt Robbie's piano. She wanted to prove to this stern, impossible-to-please woman that she could be a star student. But Michelle was also stubborn and lawyerly, constantly asking, why? But why, though? When she got impatient with Robbie's rigid, one-step-at-a-time method and started skipping ahead in the lesson book, Robbie absolutely exploded. Piano lessons became epic battles of will, a gladiatorial clash between a girl who wanted to learn faster and a teacher who believed there was only one right way to do things. Which brings us back to that grand recital hall, where young Michelle sat paralyzed before that perfect, chipless piano, unable to find her anchor. And then something surprising happened. Her great-aunt Robbie, her foil, her adversary, her piano nemesis, walked calmly up to the stage. She didn't scold. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and gently laid one finger on middle C, showing Michelle exactly where to start. In that moment, Michelle learned a lesson that would echo through her entire life. You don't always get the instrument you're used to. Sometimes the world gives you a perfect piano when you've only ever known broken keys. You have to adapt, find your place, and play your song anyway. And sometimes, the person you thought was your toughest critic is actually the one who shows you the way forward. As Michelle grew up, the world around her was changing fast. This was the era of white flight, when families were abandoning the city for the suburbs faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. The racial makeup of her neighborhood and school shifted dramatically, and it put her in this weird, uncomfortable in-between space. One summer day, a cousin turned to her with a look of accusation and asked, "How come you talk like a white girl?" Ouch. The question stung because it held a confusing kernel of truth. Her parents had drilled into her and Craig the importance of proper diction, saying going instead of goin', speaking clearly and confidently. They were taught to own their intelligence, and that showed in how they spoke. But in certain circles, that was seen as a betrayal, like she was denying her own culture, trying to be something she wasn't. She was just a girl sitting on a stoop, but she was facing a question that would follow her, and later her husband, onto the world stage. Are you what you appear to be? It's the impossible challenge of squaring who you are with where you came from and where you want to go. She was a long way from finding her voice, but the search had begun. That search led her to apply to Princeton University, following in the footsteps of her beloved brother Craig, who'd gotten in on a basketball scholarship. But even this path came with doubt and obstacles. In her first meeting with her high school's college counselor, a woman who didn't know Michelle from Adam, she was met with a dismissive smile and a soul-crushing statement, "I'm not sure you're Princeton material." It was swift, it was crushing, it was a suggestion of failure before she'd even tried to succeed, another perfect piano moment, another "you don't belong here" message. For a split second, that old feeling crept in, am I good enough? But years of keeping up with the ambitious, overachieving kids at Whitney Young, her magnet high school, had taught her something crucial: don't let one person's opinion dislodge everything you know about yourself. Instead of giving up, she switched her method without changing her goal. She found a mentor who believed in her, her assistant principal and neighbor, Mr. Smith, who wrote her a glowing recommendation. In her college essay, she didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. She owned her story, writing about her father's MS, her family's lack of college experience, and the fact that, given her background, reaching was all she could do. Months later, a letter arrived at the house on Euclid Avenue. It was an offer of admission to Princeton. Take that, dismissive counselor. She was Princeton material after all. Part 3. The lawyer who hated being a lawyer. But arriving at Princeton was like stepping onto another planet. It was overwhelmingly white and male. A sea of polo shirts and inherited confidence. The students around her moved with this effortless assurance, their trust in the world seemingly infinite. They'd had SAT tutors. They'd gone to boarding schools with Roman numerals in their names. They'd been playing on perfect pianos their entire lives. It was that recital all over again. She found her footing, as she always did, by finding her tribe. She gravitated toward the Third World Center TWC, a home base for students of color. There, among other Black and Latino students navigating this strange new world, she found relief and support. She met Suzanne Alayali, one of her dearest friends, a vibrant, joyful soul from Jamaica who lived life with a Caribbean breeziness, unafraid to plunge into the unknown. Princeton taught Michelle that there were other ways of being in the world, but she was still driven, still a box checker, still that girl who needed to get things right. So after Princeton, she did the next logical thing, Harvard Law School. And from there, she landed the job, the very definition of success, an associate at Sidley & Austin, one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms. She'd made it. 25 years old, with a corner office on the 47th floor of a skyscraper, a leather chair, a view of Lake Michigan, and an assistant. She had a salary that would finally let her pay off her student loans. She had vaulted herself from the South Side to the very pinnacle of the professional world. She'd checked every box, proven to everyone, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that she was good enough. And she was absolutely, soul-crushingly miserable. Plot twist. This is where Michelle's story takes a crucial turn. It's the part where becoming starts to mean unbecoming what you thought you were supposed to be. Life at the law firm was a grind of 70-hour workweeks, spent reading memos, writing memos, and editing other people's memos. The work was precise, intellectual, and empty. Completely empty. The little girl who dreamed of being a pediatrician because she loved kids was now spending her days protecting the legal interests of corporations. She'd followed the path of achievement so perfectly that she'd completely missed the signs she was on the wrong road. Two events shook her awake from this high-achieving slumber. First, her best friend from Princeton, Suzanne, the free spirit who'd taught her so much about joy, was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive cancer and died at just 26. 26. The loss was brutal and clarifying. Life is short. Life is not to be wasted doing things that make you miserable. Second, her father passed away from complications of MS at only 55. The man who'd been her rock, her model of quiet strength, was gone. His death left a crater in her life, but also sharpened her focus like a laser. If she died tomorrow, she didn't want to be remembered for legal briefs. She felt certain she had something more to offer the world. And then, in the midst of all this existential confusion, a young man with a funny name walked into her life. Part 4. Enter backstage left and late. He was a summer associate at the firm, and Michelle, as a junior associate, was assigned to be his mentor. His name was Barack Obama, and he was late on his first day. "Great start, buddy." Michelle was skeptical, deeply skeptical. Rumor had it he was brilliant, exceptional, maybe the most gifted law student one Harvard professor had ever encountered. The secretaries were whispering that he was cute. Michelle's internal response? You can put a suit on any half-intelligent black man and white people will lose their minds. But then they went to lunch, and as he started talking, her skepticism began to melt like ice cream on a July afternoon. He wasn't just smart. He was serious without being self-serious, breezy in manner but powerful in mind. And surprisingly, he knew her Chicago. Before law school, he'd spent 3 years as a community organizer on the far South Side, trying to rebuild neighborhoods devastated by steel mill closures. He'd worked in barbershops and Bible-thumping parishes she'd only known from a distance. There was an immediate pull between them, chemistry, magnetism, whatever you want to call it. But Michelle was focused on her career. "I don't date," she told him firmly, trying to keep things professional. She even tried to set him up with her friends. Classic defensive maneuver. Barack was persistent. "I think we should go out," he said one day, flashing that confident smile. "You're not my boss, and you're pretty cute." She eventually said yes. One summer evening, after a long day at a firm barbecue, he drove her home. They stopped for ice cream, and as they sat on a curb with their cones melting in the July heat, he turned to her with a curious smile. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. And as she leaned in, everything felt clear, crystal clear. As soon as she allowed herself to feel something for him, the feelings came rushing in like a dam breaking, a toppling blast of lust, gratitude, and wonder. Any worries about her career seemed to evaporate, replaced by a driving need to know everything about this fascinating, confounding man. Their connection deepened one evening when she went with him to a church basement in Roseland, a neighborhood crippled by unemployment. He was there to lead a workshop for residents, helping them harness their frustration and turn it into real political power. He spoke with a passion and clarity she'd never seen before. He wasn't talking down to them. He was connecting their stories to a larger hope, a larger vision. He asked them a simple question that would stay with Michelle for years. Do we settle for the world as it is, or do we work for the world as it should be? Watching him inspire that small group of weary people, she saw the core of who he was, and she was convinced this was the one. But their path wasn't simple. Is it ever? Barack, she learned, wasn't so sure about marriage. He saw it as an, quote, unnecessary and overhyped convention. Meanwhile, Michelle, raised in the unbreakable union of her parents, saw marriage as a given. This led to a long, looping, lawyerly debate that stretched over months. One night, at a restaurant, right in the middle of this very argument, the waiter brought over a dessert plate covered with a silver lid. When he lifted it, there wasn't chocolate cake underneath. There was a velvet box with an engagement ring inside. Barack had staged the whole argument. As she stared at the ring, tears streaming, he said that even though their love was already foundation enough, he wanted to take that leap with her. He asked her to marry him. Through her tears, she said yes. They married in October 1992, surrounded by a joyful mix of the eclectic, multicultural Obamas and the anchoring Robinsons from the South Side. Her brother Craig, standing in for their late father, walked her down the aisle. Part 5. Marriage, Motherhood, and the Messy Middle. But here's the thing about marriage. It doesn't solve your problems, it magnifies them. Barack was a man with a vision, a deep calling to public service. He was also, and Michelle says this affectionately, a man who lived in his head. He needed his hole, a messy, book-strewn office where he could retreat to think and write. He was a serial overcommitter, taking on a teaching job, serving on nonprofit boards, and soon running for the Illinois State Senate. Michelle, meanwhile, had finally made her own swerve. She'd left corporate law, taking a huge pay cut to work for the city of Chicago. and then as founding executive director of Public Allies, an organization mentoring young people for public service careers. For the first time, her work felt immediately meaningful. But their two ambitious paths kept colliding. And then came the desire for children. It wasn't easy. A heartbreaking miscarriage was followed by the clinical, lonely, stressful journey of IVF in vitro fertilization. It was a burden that fell almost entirely on Michelle. Barack was in Springfield, legislating, while she was at home giving herself daily hormone shots. It was a small, quiet moment of reckoning. A test of her desire. And she wanted it so much. The reward came in the sound of a swishing, watery heartbeat on an ultrasound machine. On the 4th of July, 1998, Malia was born. 3 years later, Sasha arrived, completing their family. Motherhood became her motivator, her purpose, her everything. But it also intensified the strain in their marriage. She was now juggling a demanding job, 2 small children, and a husband who was often gone. The new math of their family life: 2 kids, 3 jobs, 0 free time. The frustration built up and erupted in arguments about his lateness, about the unequal division of labor, about the crushing feeling that she was carrying the weight of their family life alone. Their love was deep and real, but they had a knot at the center they couldn't untangle. This is where many stories end in divorce court, but theirs didn't. They went to couples counseling. Yes, really, even future presidents need therapy. In the quiet of that therapist's office, they learned to talk again, to separate their weapons from their wounds. Michelle began to see that she was more in charge of her own happiness than she'd been allowing herself to be. She'd been waiting for Barack to change, to give up his ambitions for a more normal life. But the counseling helped her realize she could be happier by changing her own approach. She started getting up at dawn to exercise, reclaiming a piece of the day for herself. She established an ironclad dinner and bedtime routine for the girls, putting the responsibility on Barack to either make it home on time or catch up later. She wasn't waiting for Dad anymore. It was his job to keep up with them. It was a profound shift. She was learning to build a life that felt whole on her own terms, not in reaction to his schedule. This new strength would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Part 6. From state senator to, wait, what? In 2004, Barack was asked to give the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. He was just a state senator from Illinois, a relative nobody. That night, he spoke for 17 minutes about hope, about his improbable story, about America's promise. By the time he finished, the crowd was roaring. The world had changed. Suddenly, he wasn't just Barack. He was Barack Obama, political rock star, potential future president, the guy everyone wanted a piece of. The quiet life they'd fought so hard to build began to unravel like a cheap sweater. The question started bubbling up, first as a whisper, then as a roar. Would he run for president? Michelle didn't want him to. She loved their life. Their 2 girls, her meaningful work as a vice president at the University of Chicago Medical Center. A presidential run felt like a threat to everything. She feared the ugliness of politics, the loss of privacy, the danger, what it would do to their daughters. It felt like her against the world. Barack had told everyone the decision was a family decision, which was code for only if Michelle gives me permission. In the end, she said yes. She said yes because she believed in him, because she saw the world as it was, with its injustices and struggles, and knew her husband had an unwavering desire to work for the world as it should be. She couldn't stand in the way of that. But she made one condition, announced to their closest friends. If he lost, this would be the end of his political career, period. Done. Finito. The campaign was a human blur, a vortex of flights, speeches, and endless crowds. Michelle had to learn to live in this new reality, where she was no longer just Michelle Robinson from the South Side but a public figure, a symbol, a target. And the punches started coming, hard. She was criticized for saying she was really proud of her country for the first time, words twisted to paint her as unpatriotic. She was labeled an angry black woman. A playful fist bump with Barack? Called a terrorist fist jab. Fox News referred to her as Obama's baby mama. Are you kidding me? It hurt deeply. It was like there was a cartoon version of her out there. Some Godzilla political wife she didn't recognize, stomping around, destroying things. She was learning the hard lesson about bullies. Their aggression has little to do with you and everything to do with them, but that doesn't make it hurt less. She found her strength by finding her voice, not the voice the pundits wanted, but her voice. She went to Iowa and spoke not as a political spouse, but as a mother, a daughter, a wife, a working professional. She told her real story, with all its imperfections and struggles. She connected with people over shared values, not political talking points. And they responded. The campaign started calling her the closer for her ability to win over undecided voters. The journey took them all the way to election night 2008. As results came in, Michelle sat in a Chicago hotel suite, quietly terrified. She couldn't shake the fear of the Bradley effect, the theory that white voters would lie to pollsters and then vote against a black candidate in the privacy of the voting booth. Was America really ready for this? At 10 o'clock, the networks called it. Barack Hussein Obama would be the 44th President of the United States. That night, standing on a stage in Grant Park, before 200,000 people, behind a wall of bulletproof glass, her life changed forever. She was no longer just becoming Michelle. She was becoming First Lady. Part 7. Living in a Fancy Cage. Living in the White House, she discovered, is like living in a fancy hotel where you're the only guests. It's a place of strange grandeur and surreal stillness. The walls are thick, the windows are bomb-resistant, and the silence is deep. It's a bubble, hermetically sealed off from the everyday world. Her first priority? Making it a home for Malia and Sasha. She instructed the staff that her daughters, then 10 and 7, would still make their own beds, because even in the White House, you're not raising entitled brats. She fought for playdates and sleepovers that required Secret Service coordination that would make a military operation look simple. But she also understood the unique opportunity. When Nelson Mandela was 92 and frail, she took her daughters to meet him in his home. A quiet, profound encounter, teaching them that progress happens not over years, but over lifetimes. As First Lady, she had to forge her own path. There's no handbook for this job. She knew she couldn't be just a well-dressed ornament, standing silently beside her husband. She had to do something purposeful. That purpose began in the soil of the South Lawn, where she broke ground on a vegetable garden. Simple, right? But it was a powerful symbol. That garden became the springboard for Let's Move, her major initiative to combat childhood obesity. She went on talk shows, did push-ups with Ellen DeGeneres, hula-hooped on the White House lawn, and appeared on Sesame Street. She was using her platform to connect her message to the mainstream in ways that felt genuine and joyful. With Dr. Jill Biden, she launched Joining Forces to Support Military Families, an issue that became deeply personal as she spent time at military hospitals listening to wounded warriors and their spouses. These were people who embodied resilience, who carried on with dignity despite unimaginable hardship. But the White House years were also marked by unspeakable tragedy. She remembers the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, finding Barack in the Oval Office, his posture slumped, the weight of the nation's grief crushing his shoulders. He was so broken by what had happened in those classrooms that he couldn't even describe it to her. It was one of the few times she chose not to stand with him in public, sending him to the prayer vigil in Newtown alone, because she felt too raw, too much like a mother herself to offer any comfort. She lived with the constant, ugly undercurrent of racism that her family's presence in the White House provoked. The birther conspiracy theory, fanned into flames by Donald Trump, wasn't just a political tactic. It was a dangerous, deliberate effort to delegitimize her husband and stir up hatred. It put her family at risk, and she would never forgive him for it. Through it all, she held on to a motto she and Barack tried to live by, one she shared at the 2016 Democratic Convention: "When they go low, we go high." It wasn't about ignoring the ugliness. It was about refusing to let it pull you down, refusing to stoop to its level. It was about choosing dignity when everything in you wants to fight dirty. As their 8 years came to a close, she watched the 2016 election with disbelief and then deep, aching disappointment. The night Trump was elected, she went to bed wanting to block it all out, a feeling she admits wasn't productive but was honest. Leaving the White House on Inauguration Day 2017 was a blur of emotions. Sitting on that stage, looking out at a crowd far less diverse than the ones at her husband's inaugurations, she stopped even trying to smile. The transition was a passage to something new, and she was ready to find herself again, ready to keep becoming. Commentary: what do we do with this? So what do we take from a life this extraordinary? Michelle Obama's journey is a masterclass in what it means to become. And the key word there is become. It's a verb, an action, a process that's never, ever finished. When we're young, we think of life as a checklist: get good grades, go to a good college, get a good job. We build our lives like perfectly folded origami, trying to tuck in every messy bit, hoping it all looks right from the outside. Michelle did exactly that. She checked every box, reached the pinnacle, and found herself feeling empty. And that's the first huge lesson. Fulfillment isn't a destination. It's not a box you check off and boom, you're done. It's a feeling you have to actively seek out, sometimes by abandoning the path everyone told you was right. Her story gives us permission to swerve, to question our trajectory, even when we're doing everything correctly. She left the prestigious law firm, took the pay cut, started over in search of work that felt meaningful. Your passion matters more than your paycheck. Your purpose matters more than your prestige. Write that down. The second lesson is about partnership, and it's not a fairy tale. The love story between Michelle and Barack is real. It's messy. It's a story of two strong, ambitious people learning to build a life together through fighting, making up, and yes, going to therapy. It's about recognizing you can't change another person, but you can change your own approach. She didn't wait for him to become the husband she thought she needed. She learned to take charge of her own happiness, and in doing so, strengthened their partnership. It's a beautiful model for modern relationships. Two whole people, not two halves, choosing to walk the same path together. Finally, her story is a masterclass in finding and using your voice. From the kindergartner demanding a do-over, to the college student owning her South Side story, to the First Lady speaking out for children and military families, her journey is about refusing to be silenced, refusing to shrink herself. She was told she wasn't Princeton material. She was told she was too angry, too tall, too direct, too black. She was caricatured and criticized and called names that would make most people curl up and hide. But she learned the ultimate lesson: you can't let others define you. You have to define yourself. You have to tell your own story. As she says, your story is what you have, what you will always have. It is something to own. 3 things you can do right now. First, think about your story. What parts do you hide? What parts make you proud? Own all of it. Your imperfections, your chipped keys, aren't weaknesses. They're the source of your unique strength and perspective. Second, find your people. Michelle's journey was never solo. It was supported by family, friends, and mentors who saw her and believed in her. Find the people who truly see you and lean on them shamelessly. Third, ask yourself that question Barack posed in that church basement all those years ago. Are you settling for the world as it is, or are you working for the world as it should be? You don't have to be president to make a difference. You just have to start where you are with what you have. That was Becoming by Michelle Obama. We've journeyed through the main arcs of her incredible life, but let me be honest. A summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. You can see the shapes and colors, but you can't feel the sun on your skin or the breeze in the air. The real power of this book is in the quiet moments, in her personal reflections, in the texture of her voice on the page. This summary is meant to give you a map of that landscape. If anything we've explored today has resonated with you, if you felt anything reading this, I urge you to take the journey yourself. Grab a copy, because reading it is more than learning facts. It's an experience that can genuinely shift how you see your own potential and your path of becoming. If you found this valuable, hit that subscribe button and like this video. It tells us these deep dives matter and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing and becoming together.